Welcome back to Simrite Fashion Academy YouTube channel for another interesting tutorial. In this tutorial, I'll be teaching you how to sew this beautiful bags gathered gown with front placket, as you can see right here on the thumbnail and on the video. So this is what I got right here, and you can see my beautiful placket right there and the bags line. I actually made this dress for a plus size, so you can see my dress form is not actually the size of this dress, but I just want to show you what I am making. So I'm going to attach my feathers at that point. So I will get feathers and sew it in right there. So here is the placket. I will encourage you to stay till the end of this tutorial to learn more. So now I'm making use of ADIRE fabric. I have 4 yards and 2 yards. So I will be using the 4 yards and 2 yards of ADIRE right now. But before that, we are going to draft our basic bodice pattern. Here I'm marking out my chest line, bust line, under bust line and waistline. So here I'm ruling the lines so we can start up drafting immediately. Here is the shoulder line. So I'm going to take my shoulder measurement right now. So you are going to use your shoulder measurement divided by 2. So my shoulder measurement divided by 2 right here is 8 inches. I'll mark it on the chest line as well. I'm using 4 inches for my neck depth and neck width. So I'm going to connect the neck depth and neck width. So if you're on a smaller size, you can use 3 by 3 because this is actually a high neck, but I'm making for a plus size. So you just come down by 1 inch and then connect back to the chest line. I'm going to find the midpoint of my armhole, go in by 0.75. On the chest line, you are going to measure your bust circumference divided by 4 and mark, then connect your armhole. So the next thing we want to do is to label the lines. I have my shoulder, my chest line, my bust point, under bust, waistline. So on the bust point, I'm taking my nipple to nipple measurement. So I'm using 4.5 inches right here. And my dart intake is 1.5, which is 0.75, 0.75 or 3/4 on each side. After that, I'm going to take my waist circumference divided by 4. Then I'm going to add my dart of 1.5. Then connect my side line. My bust dart is 2.5 inches. That is the difference. I find the midpoint, and then on that midpoint, I'll come out by 0.75 and connect back to the chest line. So my basic bodice pattern is ready. We'll start to contour the line. So I'm going to divide my shoulder into 2, my shoulder seam line into 2, and connect to the bust point. And I'm taking my under bust circumference divided by 4 from the center front. Whatever you have remaining, you are going to put at the front side of the dart, 0.25 or 1/4, then the rest of it on the side. With this, you are going to contour your under bust perfectly. So I just mark out my line. You can see how I'm placing my ruler to contour that under bust. So after that is done, I'm going to connect directly to the waistline, as you can see. So we are going to make a princess dart. So this princess dart, I'm going to position my ruler. So I always like to position my ruler to run into the under bust curve. So wherever it comes on the armhole. From the midline, I have 2 inches. So I came out by 1 inch to accommodate my dart, and I connect. So this is how I like to draft my princess dart. Okay, you can add a dart or you cannot. So but this works perfectly for me. So my princess dart is ready right there. So the neckline I'm using here for the opening is 8 inches. So now I'm going to take the length of my back's line. So I'll first of all get my hip line first. That will guide me on how to get the basque. So but I just thought of cutting out my pattern first, okay, so I can separate the darts. So I'm done cutting out my pattern and separated the darts. This is F1 and F2. So I'll close up my bust dart right now. So I apply my adhesive to close up my bust dart. So once I close up the bust dart right now, then I'll bring back this pattern so I can cut out the back line. So you bring a plain pattern paper and arrange it the way I did right here. So place your waist half length and measure your hip line. That is what I was doing before. So you measure your hip line and then measure your waist circumference divided by 4 on the waistline. So then on the hip line, I'm going to create a mark on the hip line and on the waistline. So what I'm drafting is just like a skirt. This is my waist and this is the hip line. So now on the waistline, I'm going to take my waist circumference divided by 4. On the hip line, I'm going to take my hip circumference divided by 4 and connect, just like you connect a skirt. So here is my center front. Then I'll come down on the side by 5 inches. You come down from the waistline by 5 inches and then come down from the hip line by 4 inches and connect it from that 4 inches. You connect from the 5 inches on the side to the center front. So you can see what I had right now. So I'm just trying to cross check what I have. So I have it at 33 inches, the length of that back at the center front from the waistline. So I'm going to cut out my backs, and this is the front backs, which is going to be unfold. So the front pattern is ready right now. I'm going to set it aside and go over to the back drafting. So I mark my chest line and my waistline only for the back. So I'm going to rule my lines across, as you can see. So here is the center back, here is my shoulder, my chest and the waistline. These are the only lines I need for now. The neck width remains 4 inches, okay, and I mark my shoulder seam line. So the neck depth is 1.5. You can use 1 inch if you're on a smaller size. So I'm connecting my neckline, as you can see right here. Come down by 1 inch and connect your shoulder slant. Make a straight line. Find the midpoint of your armhole. Go in by ½ an inch for the back. Connect. Then your bust circumference divided by 4. You are going to also mark it and connect your complete armhole. Then on the waistline, I'm going to mark my waist circumference divided by 4. Then I have closed up the basic bodice for the back. But I want to contour the center back with 1 inch to avoid zip bulge. So I just connect it to the neckline. Now I'm going to replace that on the side. So I started from the contour line to mark my waist circumference divided by 4 and my bust divided by 4. So I have replaced it and this is what we got. So next, I'm going to place my tape on that back length and measure my hip line. So you are going to count 2.5 inches up if your bust dart is 2.5 inches. So that will be your hip line. So I'm going to also contour the down part of the skirt. Remember, this is how, if you are making a gown, this is how we contour it. So from that 1 inch, you go to nothing to the hip. So I've marked my hip circumference divided by 4 and my waist circumference divided by 4 and I've connected. So I'll come down on the side by 5 inches. And then for the front, I'm going to measure the length of that basque. So the length of that basque, that is what I also use for the back. So I just mark the length of the backs, and from that 5 inches, I'll just mark my back line for the back. So you can see how the back line for the back is. It has a zip contour line because this is a full gown. It needs to relax on the back very, very well. So now I'm going to cut out the contour line we have on that back line for the back. So the back piece is ready as well. So you have to label the center back and the waistline to avoid confusing you. So you can see what I have for the back right now. So the patterns are ready. We have our front patterns and we have our back patterns. So now we'll go over to cut it on fabric. So I'm cutting it on the 2 yards of my fabric. I've cut right now. I hasted everything. I opened up the center front, added ½ an inch all around. On the side, I added 2 inches for my seam allowance. So I cut out a 2 inches strip. This is 2 inches strip. We'll use it for the placket. So this 2 inches strip right now, I cut 2 pieces of it and hasted it. So the width is 2 inches, but the length is as long as you wish. So I'm going to fold in half an inch and iron. That is what I did. So I'm taking off my pattern right now. And I'm going to measure from the center front of the main fabric. You can see I splitted the fabric into 2. You measure 2 inches from the center front, 2 inches from the center front, and rule a straight line. Then you also measure 2 inches again and rule a straight line like that. So I'm going to bring in that piece. The piece is actually 2.5 inches in width. I'm sorry about that, 2.5 inches in width. So when you measure 2 inches on the fabric, you place it on the line with your pin. We are going to top stitch that half an inch part I folded right there. So we are going to top stitch on it. So I'll go over to the machine and top stitch right now. So after top stitching, this is what I have. You can see my top stitching. So I'm going to cut out the excesses I have. So I've cut out the excesses on the neckline and on the waistline, and I did the same for the other piece as well. So right now we are going to put the fabric together, as you can see right here. So but before that, we want to cut out the bustier part. So you can use any method of cutting out your bustier. So this is the method I always like to use. I use my pattern to create my bustier using my bust span circumference just to mark a radius on it to get my bust. So that is exactly what I'm doing right here. So after marking it now, I'm going to cut out my bustier. Okay, so I will use this to cut my wadding. So I will go ahead and cut that part off and then cut my wadding. So I'm using this piece of paper right now. This is my pattern I'm cutting out from the under bust as my wadding. So I'll just cut out my wadding and mark the upper piece on the rough side of the wadding, because the wadding has a sticky part as well. So I'm going to split open. I cut the wadding for the center front unfold. So I'm splitting it into 2 right now. So I'm going to bring in the fabric from the under bust. I made a notch. So I'm going to place the sticky part of it, as you can see, leaving half an inch in front to stitch the front piece together. So I'm going to secure with my pin from the back, as you can see. So I will use my hairstay to finish up the wadding. So here I'm also repeating the same thing for the other part. Of course, you know this part, okay? You can just go ahead and pad the way you want. So this is how I pad mine. So now they are already the front piece. So we'll start to join them together. So to join it together, you are going to put the center front, the 2 pieces together. Make sure you secure with your pin appropriately. So remember, there's an opening for this placket. So I will make sure I secure with my pin, then measure 5.5 inches downwards. I'll measure 5.5 inches downwards and then mark my half an inch. So I'm going to sew down from that half an inch down, from that 5 inches down. Then for the lining, I put it together right side to right side, secure with my pins as well. So the next I will do is to also mark 5.5 inches. It depends on how open you want that placket to be anyway. So 5.5 is just what I want to use, but you can use 6 inches as deep as you want it. So here I'm marking half an inch, 5.5 on that part, then half an inch to stitch the lining. So I'll just go over to my machine now. I'm going to stitch on the chalk line and then give it a good press. So here I'm done stitching and I opened it, I pressed it down, as you can see, for lining and fabric. So you are going to put the lining and fabric right side to right side. So this part is very important, okay, for this tutorial. So you just match right side to right side, the neckline, the placket opening. You just secure them with your pins accordingly. So you can see how I'm pinning them. I'm pinning it in a way I can stitch right on top of my pins to the point of that opening. So I'm also going to pin, as you can see right there, to the point of the other opening. Then I will take my time on this part, because if you don't get this part very well, the dress is not going to be beautiful. So now I'm going to also pin the neckline, as you can see, on the other side. So you have to pin before you go over to the machine to stitch. So this other side too, I secured with my pin as well. So you have to do this for all the neckline. So I'm done pinning right now. I'm going over to the machine. So I'm going to stitch on the chalk line. So I'll first stitch the neckline to the end. Then I'll now stitch the placket to the point I have my stitches. So I will repeat the same thing, the same process. You stitch one end to the end and then take the other end from the beginning to the other end. So here on the machine, I've stitched one side and I'm going to start stitching the other side as well. So like I earlier explained, you are going to start from one end and stitch to the other end. So I'm going to stitch from this end right now at 1/2 inch. I'll stitch the neckline from that point to the other end. So once I'm done stitching that part, I'm going to go over to the other part to stitch too. So I'll just stitch it like that. So I've completed that part. Then I'm going to start from the other end too on the placket, and I'm going to stitch from there down to the part I have that stitching. So you have to touch that stitching very carefully by bringing out the lining below and the fabric above, and then connect that stitches. Can you see that? There's a stitches there. When you start to sew yours, you see that stitch, then you back stitch. So here I'm done. So that is how to go about it. So the neckline is ready right now. So we are going to turn it to the right side. So you can see what we have right there. So make sure you make notches to this neckline so it will be very easy for you to turn, okay? So I'm going to chop off that part. You can see that part I was explaining how I stitched it. So you have to chop it off carefully. Then this is how I like to turn necklines, like this. So, but I'm going to top stitch first the neckline. So make sure you top stitch to the extent you can. So I've top stitched to the extent I can, and this is how I'm going to turn it. So you have to fold it like a square and then on both sides, so it will be very easy for you to turn. So here you can see I'm turning the both of them. So after turning the both neckline right now, next is to give it a good press. So I head over to the machine and press it down. So here is what I got. So the next thing I'm going to do is to join the bustiers right now. So you can now go over to the machine and join your bustier the way you know how. Fabric to fabric, lining to lining. So I'm done joining right there. So next is to make notches on that bustier, because I'm going to use my tailor's ham to press it out. So after making notches, we are going to give it a good press. So I'm done pressing it down. So next is the princess dart. I have excess on it. So if you have excess on your princess dart, just cut it off. So just mark it this way. You can see how I marked it. So sometimes you can have excess, then you cut it off to match up with the armhole. So that is exactly what I'm doing right here, okay? And it does not affect anything at all. So the front dress is ready. I'll pick up the back piece. So the first thing we are going to do to the back piece is to match it right side to right side, lining and fabric, and stitch the neckline at 1/2 inch. So I'm stitching the neckline at 1/2 inch right now, but you have to secure it with your pin before you stitch. So after pinning it down, I'm going to mark out 1/2 inch, 1/2 inch. So I'll just mark 1/2 inch, 1/2 inch like that. Go over to my machine and stitch. So after stitching, make sure you notch and then flip all your seams to this part of the lining and top stitch and give it a good press. So I'm done with that. We are going to match the shoulder seam line. So you match them together the way I'm doing. Wrap it with the lining and stitch 1/2 inch. So here you can see I've joined the front and back. So we are going to join the backs line right now. We are joining the backs for the front, for the fabric, backs for the front, for the lining. Then we are going to also join the back piece together. So I'll go over to my machine right now. I'm going to join them together. So after joining, this is what I have for the front. So I'm going to pick up the backs for the back and I'm going to align them according to the zipper line. Then I'm joining fabric to fabric and lining to lining as well. So here I've opened it, as you can see right here. So I've stitched together and we have the full back. So I'm going to sew the size at 2 inches. So I'll just go lining to lining and fabric to fabric for the sides. So I gave it a good press. You can see how I opened the sides after stitching. And we have a perfect inseam finishing at the front. So this is what I got all the way. So I'm going to mark out 8 inches or 9 inches for my zipper. Then pick up the fabric and stitch the part just like you do when you are sewing a skirt or a gown. So the part where the zipper is not going to be, that is what I'm trying to pin right now. And remember we added 1 inch on that side. So I'll just go ahead and mark out from that point 1 inch, 1 inch, 1 inch and stitch close. So I also did the same for the fabric, for the lining too. So I'm going to attach my zip accordingly. So I'm going to sew my zip right now on the fabric first. So I'm going to mark 1 inch on this side of the fabric first. I'll mark 1 inch, 1 inch, 1 inch like that and sew my zip on the fabric. Then I'm going to turn it with my lining. So you can see how I flip my lining. So I'll go ahead and secure with my pins and follow the stitches of the zip line and stitch the lining too. Okay, this is just to have a perfect inseam finishing. But if you want, you can sew the way you like to sew anyway. So I am going to the machine with my zipper foot to complete the stitching of my zip. That is what I'm going to do right now. So I'm done stitching the zip. Make sure you give it a good press as well. So the dress is almost ready. So we are going to take the measurement of what we have on that back line. You take the measurement of what we have because we are going to use this measurement to cut out the gathered parts. So here I have 62 inches. So, but before that, I'm going to use a fishing line and I cut 1 inch of my strip. The length of this strip is as long as the measurement I have and even above. So I'm going to insert my fishing line. This is just to create a little design on that back line. So I'll go over to the machine now to stitch that fishing line into the strip. So here is my fishing line. You just put it into that 1 inch strip like this and place it on that back line from the back part, that is the center front or center back part. So I'm going to use my zipper foot to sew this part. So you can see me using my zipper foot. I will use it to sew all the way until I get to the next basque. So once you get to the next pointy part, that is the back part, then you are going to stop at that point. So make sure you face it inside the fabric, okay? You can see I'm facing this fishing line inside the fabric. So I will cut it out at the next basque. Then I'll start from the other basque and sew to the next basque as well. So I will use my zipper foot. I'll keep inserting that fishing line. So if you go to the market, ask them of fishing line. You can show them this video too. So this is what I got after stitching. So the next we are going to do is to calculate the amount of fabric. So we got 62 inches. So I'm going to multiply by 2.5 for my gathers. I have 155. I'll divide by 36 inches, which is a yard. So I'm using 4 yards, or you can use 4.5 yards if you want more gathers. So this is the fabric I'm going to use for the gathered part. So I'm going to measure the 4 yards for you to see. So here is 1 yard, here is 2 yards. This is 3 yards. Then I'm measuring the 4th yard right now. So I'm using 4 yards. So I'm going to put these 4 yards together, okay? Then I'm also going to put it together again. Then I'll put it together the 8th time again, okay? So we'll be able to cut out the length that we need. So the length I need, I'm using 30 or 31 inches. So it depends on how long you want. You can take from 25 to 32, depending on how long or the height of the person. So I've cut it out right now. I'll go over to the machine and gather. So here you can see me making my gathers right now. So these gathers, we are going to sew it on the back line. So I'll just go over to sew it on the back line right now. So here is my gathers. So the open part of these 4 yards, which I gathered right now, is going to be at the center back. So make sure that side is at the center back. So I'll bring in the front and pin the center front to it. So you pin the center front, but you have to start gathering from the center back where you have the opening. So you are going to place this gathered part right on top of that fishing line. Then as you are sewing, make sure you are filling the fishing line, okay? Just be filling it and stitching with your zipper foot. So here you can see me stitching right now. So I'm going to stitch this all around from that center back until I get back to the center back. So after stitching, this is what I got. You can see how beautiful it's looking. So I'll go over to the back. The back is still opening because that is still open because that is where we started stitching. So I'm going to put it together and sew 1/2 inch. So I'm done sewing 1/2 inch right now, as you can see. So the dress is very much ready. So the next thing, I also stitched the lining. I used 3 yards of my lining. So that part does not really need too much gathers. So I'm going to sew the armhole, the sleeve right now to the armhole. So here is my sleeve. I've prepared it. So I bring in the dress right now, turn it to the wrong side, open the zipper, turn it to the wrong side and insert your sleeve. So I'm going to insert my sleeve right now and I'm going to secure with my pin on the shoulder seam line. I'll pin the shoulder seam line and I'll also pin the armhole. Then you can decide to pin all around after pinning these 2 strategic points. Then you go over to the machine and you are going to stitch at 1/2 inch. So I'm done stitching and this is what we got. You can see this dress is very, very beautiful. So because we stitched a straight piece to the backs, the length will be longer at the center. So what you do is to place this dress on a flat surface, okay? And then you are going to align the side of this today and cut off that excess which your basque gave to you, just to make it straight, or else the center will be longer because of the back line. So I'm going to cut out this excess right now, okay? So that is how to go about the sewing of this beautiful dress. So I believe this class was helpful to you. So if you are new to this channel, please kindly subscribe and turn on your notification bell. Thank you for coming.